Hey everyone, welcome back. Get ready to level up your leadership game because today we're diving into Elevate to Leadership, a program designed specifically for young professionals.
And what's really cool about this program is it really seems to get the whole transition, like going from that technical expert role to actually leading a team.
Yeah, it's a pretty big leap, isn't it?
It is. It's like, switching from looking through a microscope to using a telescope. You're shifting from all those tiny details to seeing the big picture, the impact of everything.
I love that analogy. And how does Elevate help with that shift from microscope to telescope?
Well, it starts by acknowledging that leadership, it's not just about those technical skills anymore. It's understanding how everything connects, how your decisions affect the whole team.
Right, and I imagine that takes, a different kind of intelligence.
You got it. That's where emotional intelligence comes in. And Elevate, they really highlight that. It's essential, they say.
I used to think emotional intelligence was just about, being nice to people. But it sounds like it's a lot more complex than that.
Oh, for sure. Elevate emphasizes that emotional intelligence is about being able to read people, understand their motivations, manage relationships effectively.
Yeah, it's almost like the human side of leadership, which could be even tougher than the technical stuff.
Definitely. And especially when you're a young leader, right? You've probably got people doubting you because of your age. You're just learning the ropes, maybe even managing people older than you.
Right. Talk about a challenge.
Huge challenge. That's why Elevate, they stress self-awareness. Before you can lead others, you got to understand yourself.
Know thyself, right? Like that old saying.
Yeah, exactly. And Elevate, they really encourage that honest self-assessment, diving deep into your personality, your communication style, how you deal with conflict.
So it's not just about feeling good. It's about identifying those areas where you can, level up as a leader.
You got it. It's like building your own personalized leadership roadmap, figuring out where you excel and where you need to work on things.
Okay, so you've got your self-awareness sorted. What about communication? I mean, that's leadership 101, right?
Oh, absolutely. But Elevate, they go beyond the basic communication stuff. They point out that different situations call for different approaches. Sometimes you need to be assertive, sometimes empathetic, sometimes you need to be a master diplomat,
That's a good point. It's like having a whole communication toolkit and knowing which tool to use when.
Exactly. It's about adaptability. And then there's conflict resolution, something a lot of young leaders, maybe all of us, try to avoid.
Oh, yeah. Conflict is definitely not my favorite thing.
But Elevate, they don't shy away from it. They actually teach you to see conflict as a good thing, as a chance to grow, as a team.
Wait, so you're saying instead of avoiding conflict, we should embrace it?
In a way, yeah. When it's handled well, conflict can lead to better solutions, and stronger relationships within the team.
Okay, I'm starting to see it differently now. But how do you get good at that, at dealing with conflict?
Elevate gives you the tools, strategies for figuring out the root causes of conflicts, communicating clearly during those tense moments, finding solutions that work for everyone.
I like that. Becoming a conflict master instead of running away from it.
Right. And speaking of tough stuff, let's talk about decision making. That's where the pressure really hits, right?
Oh, for sure. As a young leader, you feel like every decision has to be the right one.
Well, Elevate acknowledges that there isn't always one right answer. What they do is they introduce you to all these different decision-making frameworks. Like you've got your rational model, which is all about logic and data.
Right, that makes sense.
But then you've got your intuitive model, where you're tapping into your gut feeling, your experience.
Interesting. So it's not just about the numbers.
Not at all. And then there's the participatory model, where you involve your whole team in the decision-making process.
So it's like having a bunch of different approaches in your back pocket.
Exactly. And what I found really fascinating, Elevate also digs into behavioral economics.
Behavioral economics.
Yeah.
Now that sounds complicated.
It's not as bad as it sounds. It's basically how emotions and biases can influence our choices, even as leaders.
Oh, wow. So even when we think we're being totally rational, our feelings might be sneaking in there.
All the time. And Elevate, they give you strategies to become aware of those biases so you can make more conscious choices.
Okay, this is all really interesting. But leadership isn't just about you, right? It's about leading a team.
Absolutely. And Elevate, they have a whole section on building and leading those high-performing teams. And it starts with recognizing that each person on your team, they bring something unique to the table, right?
So that emotional intelligence comes back into play, understanding those individual differences.
Exactly. It's about fostering collaboration, motivating people, creating that positive work environment where everyone can thrive.
It sounds like Elevate really emphasizes that leadership isn't about barking orders. It's about empowering your team.
You got it. It's about recognizing that everyone on the team has a role to play, that their contributions are valuable.
I love that. Making everyone feel valued and giving them the space to contribute their best.
And that's what creates those high-performing teams that achieve amazing things.
This is all so fascinating. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of elevate to leadership.
We've got so much more to uncover.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive into elevate to leadership. Last time we were talking about how important it is for young leaders to embrace conflict and to really get a handle on emotional intelligence.
Exactly. Those are key foundations.
For sure. But today, let's get into some of those, everyday leadership skills, the ones that can really help you get stuff done.
Oh yeah, the practical stuff.
Exactly. And one that always comes up is time management. It seems like every leader struggles with that, no matter how experienced they are.
You're not wrong. And Elevate, they really dig into this. They dedicate a whole module to it, actually.
Okay, I'm all ears. Because I'm always looking for better ways to manage my time. There never seems to be enough of it.
Well, one of the key takeaways is that it's all about prioritizing. Have you ever heard of the Eisenhower matrix?
I've heard of it, yeah. But I'm not sure I completely get it, to be honest.
It's pretty straightforward, actually. Basically, you divide your tasks into 4 categories. Urgent and important, important but not urgent, and so on.
Right, so you can see where you should focus your energy.
Exactly. So obviously, you want to tackle those urgent and important things first, the ones that can't wait.
Right. Put out those fires.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, and Elevate really stresses this. You can't neglect those tasks that are important but not urgent.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. Those are the things that get pushed aside when things get crazy, but they're important for the long term.
Exactly. And that's where a lot of people go wrong. They just get caught up in the day-to-day and forget about the bigger picture.
So how do you avoid that trap? I mean, I know I fall into it all the time.
Elevate suggests, actually scheduling time for those important but not urgent tasks, like block it off on your calendar, just like you would for a meeting.
So treat it as non-negotiable time, even if it's not a meeting in the traditional sense.
Right. It's an investment in your future success.
I like that. It's like making an appointment with your future self.
Exactly. And speaking of setting yourself up for success, Elevate also talks a lot about SMART goals.
SMART goals, yeah. I know I should use them more, but sometimes I find them a bit, intimidating.
They can be. But Elevate gives you all these tools for breaking those big goals down into smaller, more manageable steps.
That's good, because I think that's where I get stuck, feeling overwhelmed by the sheer size of the goal.
It's a common problem, but when you break it down, it suddenly feels a lot more doable, right?
Definitely. And then you can actually start making progress.
Exactly. And that's motivating in itself, seeing those small wins along the way.
Totally. Okay, so we've got prioritizing, SMART goals. What else? What other time management magic does Elevate have up its sleeve?
Something that a lot of young leaders struggle with, and I know I did too, is delegation.
Delegation. Ugh, that's a tough one. I always feel like I have to do everything myself.
I get it. It's like you have to prove yourself, right? But Elevate flips that whole idea on its head.
Really? How so?
They argue that delegation, it's not a sign of weakness, it's actually a sign of strength.
Okay, that's an interesting perspective.
Right. It shows that you trust your team, that you're willing to empower them.
And it frees up your time to focus on those bigger picture things.
Exactly. It's a win-win for everyone.
But I think a lot of people struggle with, how to actually delegate effectively.
That's true. That's why Elevate gives you the step-by-step process, like figuring out what tasks to delegate, who to delegate them to, how to communicate clearly, all that stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely a skill you have to learn and practice like any other leadership skill.
Definitely. And they really encourage you to view it as a developmental opportunity for your team and for yourself as a leader.
So you're not just dumping work on people, you're giving them a chance to grow and develop new skills.
Exactly. It's about empowering your team, not just offloading your to-do list.
Okay, so we've talked about prioritizing, SMART goals, delegation. What about time blocking? I've tried that in the past, but I always end up getting sidetracked.
Time blocking can be tough, but it's really effective when you get the hang of it.
Okay, so what's the secret?
It's all about treating those time blocks like they're set in stone. So if you've blocked off, say, 2 hours to work on that big presentation,
Yeah.
then you close your email, turn off your phone, and focus solely on that task.
Easier said than done, right? I always have a million things popping up demanding my attention.
I know, it's hard. But one tip Elevate suggests: schedule your toughest tasks for your peak productivity times.
Oh, that's interesting. So like if I'm a morning person, do all my deep thinking work before
They work with your natural energy rhythms, not against them.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess you have to be realistic about how much you can actually get done in a given time block.
That's key. Don't overschedule yourself. It'll just lead to frustration. And build in some buffer time for the unexpected because, things always come up.
You always do. All right, so prioritizing, SMART goals, delegating, time blocking. What else? Is there anything else we need to know about conquering our time management demons?
One more thing that Elevate really emphasizes is the importance of single tasking.
Single tasking. Isn't multitasking like the holy grail of productivity?
That's what we used to think. But actually, the research shows that multitasking just makes us less productive and more prone to making mistakes.
Yeah, wow, that's interesting. I guess it makes sense you're not really giving anything your full attention.
Exactly. Elevate encourages you to focus on one task at a time, give it 100%, and then move on to the next thing.
Okay, so no more juggling 5 things at once.
Right. Focus, focus, focus.
Got it. And is there anything else we should keep in mind about time management? Any other wisdom from Elevate on this?
One last thing that they really highlight, and it's important, is being willing to review and adjust your plans regularly. Because things change, priorities shift.
Right. And if you're rigidly sticking to a plan that's no longer working.
Exactly. You got to be flexible, adapt to the new reality.
So it's about being proactive and reassessing your schedule, making sure it still aligns with what's important.
You got it. It's about being in control of your time, not letting it control you.
I love that. All right, so we've got a handle on time management. What other essential leadership skills does Elevate cover?
Something that's super relevant for young leaders is, how to influence people even when you don't have formal authority.
Oh, influencing without authority.
Yeah.
I remember that from our prep for this deep dive. It's a fascinating concept.
It is, and it's so important because as a young leader, you're often working with people who, they don't necessarily have to listen to you.
Right. You're not the boss.
Exactly. But Elevate provides all these tools for, making things happen, driving change, even when you're not the one in charge.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. Give me the highlights.
Well, first and foremost, it all comes back to relationships.
Relationships, okay.
Yeah. You need to build those strong connections based on trust and respect.
Right. People are more likely to listen to someone they like and trust.
Exactly. So Elevate really stresses the importance of being genuine, showing interest in others, being a reliable colleague, all that good stuff.
Okay, so you got the relationships down. Then what?
Then it's about demonstrating your expertise. Show people that you know what you're talking about.
Right, so it's not about being a know-it-all. It's about having substance, actual knowledge, and experience.
Exactly. And that gives you credibility. It makes people more likely to take you seriously.
Okay, building relationships, showcasing your expertise. I imagine communication plays a big role, too.
Of course. Communication is key. Elevate gives you tips for being clear and persuasive, tailoring your message to your audience, active listening, all that good stuff.
So it's about being a good communicator, not just a good talker.
Exactly. It's about understanding your audience, connecting with them, and really listening to what they have to say.
Okay, so far we've got relationships, expertise, communication. Anything else?
Another interesting strategy they talk about is creating strategic alliances within your organization.
Strategic alliances. Okay, what's that all about?
It's about identifying those people who, they have influence. Maybe they're senior leaders, or maybe they have a lot of sway within their teams.
I see. So it's about building relationships with those influencers.
Exactly. And finding common ground, working together to achieve shared goals.
That makes sense. It's like building a network of support for your ideas.
Right. Because you can achieve a lot more when you've got people on your side.
For sure. And there's that whole thing about leading by example, right?
Oh, absolutely. Elevate is big on that. They emphasize that your actions speak louder than words.
Yeah, people can tell if you're not walking the talk.
Exactly. So if you want to influence people, you got to be a role model. Show them what you believe in through your actions.
It's about inspiring people, not just telling them what to do.
Exactly. And finally, Elevate emphasizes the importance of finding win-win solutions. Not just trying to get your way, but finding outcomes that benefit everyone.
Oh, that's so important. Because when people feel like they've been heard and their needs have been considered,
they're much more likely to be on board.
Exactly. So it's not about winning at all costs. It's about collaboration and finding solutions that work for everyone involved.
You got it. So all these strategies together, they make up this powerful toolkit for influencing without authority.
I love it. It's about making things happen even when you're not the one in charge.
Exactly. And speaking of things that can feel out of your control, let's talk about change management.
Ooh, change management. That's a big one. And in today's world, it feels like change is the only constant.
Right. And Elevate, they acknowledge that. They really emphasize that strong leadership is essential during times of change.
So it's about providing stability, direction, all that good stuff.
Exactly. And being that reassuring presence for your team, even when you might be feeling uncertain yourself.
Right, because people are looking to you for guidance.
They are. And Elevate stresses the importance of transparency. Like, keep your team informed about what's happening, why it's happening, how it will impact them.
So don't just spring changes on them out of the blue.
Yeah.
Explain the reasoning behind it.
Exactly. And help them connect the dots, show them how these changes fit into the bigger picture.
And I imagine it's important to address people's concerns, right?
Yeah.
Because change can be scary.
Oh, for sure. And Elevate really encourages you to involve your team in the change process as much as possible. So it's not just something that's being done to them. They feel like they have some ownership over it.
I like that. It's about collaboration, working together to navigate the change.
Exactly. And they also emphasize the importance of providing training and support because change often involves new processes, new technology.
Right. So people need the resources to adapt and succeed.
Exactly. And finally, Elevate reminds us that change management is not a one-time thing. You need to be constantly monitoring, evaluating, making adjustments as needed.
So it's an ongoing process, not just okay, we made the change, we're done kind of thing.
Exactly. And that's where those strong leadership skills really come in, being able to adapt, to guide your team through the ups and downs.
This is all so insightful. Okay, so we've talked about time management, influencing without authority, change management. I feel like we're missing one crucial piece here.
What's that?
Ethical leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not just about getting things done, it's about doing things the right way.
Couldn't agree more. And Elevate, they dedicate a whole module to this.
Okay, good. Because I think a lot of young leaders struggle with this.
Yeah.
The situations where there's no easy answer, those ethical dilemmas.
Oh, absolutely. And Elevate acknowledges that. They start by exploring those dilemmas, those situations where you have to weigh competing values.
Like what? Can you give me an example?
Well, a classic one is that tension between achieving organizational goals and, protecting the well-being of your team.
Oh, yeah, that's a tough one. Like, do you push your team to hit that deadline, even if it means they're burning out?
Exactly. And Elevate gives you a framework for navigating these kinds of situations.
Okay, that's good. Because I think a lot of people would just freeze up not knowing what to do.
It's tough, but they really encourage you to define your own personal code of ethics, those core principles that guide your decisions.
So you have that moral compass to steer by, even when things get complicated.
Exactly. And they also stress the importance of transparency, explaining your decisions to your team, letting them see your thought process.
So even if they don't agree with the decision, they at least understand where you're coming from.
Exactly. And that builds trust. And of course, they emphasize consistency. Like, don't just be ethical when it's convenient. Make it part of everything you do.
It's got to be ingrained in your leadership style.
Exactly. And Elevate, they also talk about accountability, taking responsibility for your decisions, even the ones that don't work out.
So owning your mistakes, learning from them, and making amends when necessary.
Exactly. And finally, they encourage you to prioritize ethical considerations over short-term gains.
Which can be tough in today's world.
Oh,
Okay.
For sure. There's a lot of pressure to get results no matter what.
Right. But Elevate reminds us that ethical leadership, it's about the long game. Building trust, creating a positive work environment, contributing to a better world.
That's powerful. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. Time management, influencing without authority, change management, ethical leadership.
It's a lot, but it's all connected,
It is. It all comes down to being an effective and responsible leader.
Exactly. And Elevate, they really drive that home. Leadership is not just about bossing people around. It's about so much more.
Okay, before we wrap up, there's one more thing I want to touch on. Continuous learning. Because it feels like, as a leader, you're never really done learning. So true. And Elevate, they have a whole module on this.
Great. What do they emphasize?
Well, they start by talking about cultivating a growth mindset. That belief that you can always learn and improve no matter where you are in your career.
So it's about embracing challenges, not being afraid to make mistakes.
Exactly. And being curious, asking questions, actively seeking out new knowledge and experiences.
It's about being a lifelong learner.
Yes. And Elevate, they provide strategies for identifying those learning opportunities, whether it's taking courses, finding a mentor, or just trying something new in your current role.
I like that. So you're being proactive about your development, not just waiting for someone to tell you what to learn.
Right. It's about taking ownership of your growth.
And they also talk about creating a personalized development plan, right?
Yes. They give you a framework for setting goals, figuring out what you need to learn, tracking your progress.
So it's like a roadmap for your leadership journey, helping you stay on track and focus.
Exactly. And one more thing they emphasize, which I think is so important, especially for young leaders, is not being afraid of failure.
Failure, but isn't that like the opposite of what you want as a leader?
That's what a lot of people think. But Elevate, they encourage you to see failure as a learning opportunity. Like, everyone makes mistakes. It's how you handle them that matters.
So it's about, analyzing your failures, figuring out what went wrong, and applying those lessons to the future.
Exactly. It's about turning those setbacks into stepping stones.
Okay, I love that. So we've talked about time management, influencing without authority, change management, ethical leadership, continuous learning. It feels like we've covered, well, just about everything.
We have. And it all comes together to paint this really comprehensive picture of what it takes to be an effective leader in today's world.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive, actually. I mean, Elevate to Leadership really seems to go deep on, well, everything.
They do. It's really a holistic program designed to help you develop all those essential skills and mindsets.
All right, well, before we get into the final module of Elevate to Leadership, let's take a quick break. We'll be back in a few minutes to wrap things up. And we are back, ready to wrap up our deep dive into Elevate to Leadership.
And we've saved the best for last, right?
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about the capstone experience, that final module that ties everything together.
Exactly. It's called Leadership in Action. And it's where you get to put all those skills and strategies to the test.
So it's like less theory, more real-world application.
That's it. They throw you into these challenging scenarios, things you might actually face as a leader.
Okay, like what? Give me an example.
Well, it could be anything, really. Maybe there's a conflict on your team that you need to resolve.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty realistic.
Or maybe there's a big organizational change happening and you need to guide your team through it.
Right. And you have to figure out how to apply everything you've learned.
Exactly. And the cool thing is you get to, role play different approaches, see what works best.
Oh, I like that. It's like a safe space to experiment and try things out.
Exactly. And you get feedback, not just from the instructors, but from your peers, too.
So you're learning from each other's experiences, getting different perspectives.
Exactly. It's a really collaborative environment.
And then the final piece of the puzzle is creating that personalized leadership action plan.
That's right. It's like, okay, I've learned all this amazing stuff. Now, how am I going to actually use it?
Yeah, how do you turn all that knowledge into real-world action?
That's what the action plan is for. You set specific goals, you outline the steps you need to take, you identify resources, all that stuff.
So it's like a roadmap for your leadership journey.
Exactly. And it helps you stay accountable, keeps you moving forward.
Okay, so we've covered the capstone experience. Now, before we wrap up this entire deep dive, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, the conflict management module.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
It is. Because I think conflict is something that a lot of leaders, especially young leaders, really struggle with.
For sure. And Elevate, they really go deep on this. They teach you to see conflict, not as something to be afraid of, but as an opportunity.
An opportunity. Okay, how so?
Well, they start by helping you understand different types of conflict, the triggers, the communication styles involved.
So you can kind of like diagnose the situation.
Exactly. And then they give you strategies for recognizing those early warning signs so you can address things before they escalate.
Oh, that's so important. I've definitely seen conflicts spiral out of control because they weren't dealt with early on.
It happens all the time. But with the right tools, you can prevent that.
Okay, so what kind of tools are we talking about?
Elevate gives you a whole bunch of communication techniques, active listening, assertive communication, all that good stuff.
So you can have those difficult conversations in a productive way.
Exactly. And they also use case studies, role-playing, all that stuff to really help you practice those skills.
I love that. It's like you're not just reading about conflict management in a textbook. You're actually getting to experience it.
Exactly. It's hands-on learning.
Okay, so we've covered pretty much everything now. The mindset shift, the challenges, emotional intelligence, communication, decision-making, leading teams, time management, influencing without authority, change management, ethical leadership, and of course, conflict resolution. Whew.
That's a lot.
It is. Elevate to Leadership really does cover all the bases.
They do. And what I love about this program is that it's not just about giving you information. It's about giving you the tools and the confidence to actually step into those leadership roles.
Exactly. It's about empowerment.
Yeah, it is. So if you're a young professional and you're, thinking about leadership, maybe feeling a bit intimidated by it.
This program, I think, it could really make a difference.
I agree. Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. Thank you so much for walking us through Elevate to Leadership.
It's been my pleasure. Always happy to talk about leadership development. And to our listeners, we hope you found this deep dive insightful and inspiring. If you're ready to level up your leadership game, definitely check out Elevate to Leadership. You won't regret it. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep learning, keep leading.